All right, welcome to Esoteric Lectures. Thank you for joining us again today. We took a break for Christmas. As you guys might have noticed, there wasn't a hangout. We wanted to take a break and, give people a chance to breathe. So that's why we didn't post hangout. But anyways, we're back, and today's going to be a very interesting discussion. We're going to be talking about the Matrix movie, and specifically how it pertains to our world being a simulation, and not only that, but how true the movie really was and what it was trying to explain to people that had the eyes to see it. Today, we have a lot to discuss, very interesting concepts to discuss today that are very important to the fabric of our reality and how this place really works and what we have discovered, and we'd like to share it. That's today's discussion. Johnny, why don't you go ahead and take it away and let's see here. What do we got? We have three main topics today. First topic, just to give everybody a background, we're going to talk about how the Matrix works pertaining to what we now understand in the structure of our world. Johnny, I know that we were talking over the past couple weeks about the Matrix movie, and I know that you wanted to in the notes, but I want to go ahead and lead this off to you because you wanted to explain a lot of revelations that you had while studying this, while us discussing this. So I wanted to go ahead and lead that off before we start off on the notes.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Johnny Midnight, as always, and I hope you all had a great holiday. I hope you have a great New Year. Okay, many of our viewers in this audience are MGTOW and or Red Pill in some way, shape, or form, and of course the movie The Matrix is very, very important to you. It's important to me. It's a very important element, and I never realized exactly how what a landmark film this is until really just like 2 weeks ago. Element had shown me this derivative work called The Animatrix, which I had watched I think the last time on VHS in 2001. It's an animated anthology of Matrix stories, and you can find it. It's on YouTube, but it was illustrating exactly what was going on in the hypostatic layer of reality, in which Neo and all of humanity are encapsulated in those little red pods, right? And I finally was able to visualize, I'm a very visual person, but that illustration, that analogy of how our souls are occupying those pods, and the people that we are, walking every day, going to work, going to frickin' Starbucks, or hopping in our cars and trucks and whatnot, are the avatars that are being controlled by those souls in those pods. I finally got it. I finally understood, after having originally watched the film in 1999 in the theaters. And back then I was blue pill as all get out. I was like, wow, that is a good science fiction film. What an interesting concept. Okay, and that's about as far as it went. And then on as I went throughout my life, I would hear all about, the blue pill, the red pill, learning the truth, or consuming the lie. And I understood that concept just fine, but I didn't really understand the structure of man versus the pneuma, or the soul, the mind over the matter. And now I finally think I get it.
Yeah, it's a very, very telling movie. A lot, and I was along the same boat too when I was researching this. It was brought to my attention that's exactly when it was brought to my attention from the Animatrix movie specifically, while I was, going over this with Johnny, that we said, well, wow, that's the pods of the soul those little red pods are what the soul is, you know, and that is what is represented in the movie is that your soul, you know, we've discussed this in our previous hangouts of the dynamics of the Heil as well as the Pleroma. If you don't know about that, then I suggest people go back and check those out so you can understand what we're discussing. If you're just, you know, because we've actually gotten several new subscribers. So if you're, you know, just checking it out, go back and watch so you can understand what we're talking about with these concepts. But the soul itself is in those pods. And if you look closely at Neo, when he wakes up inside the pod, he has his head shaved, he has his eyebrows shaved. I indicated that this very much looks like it is depicting an androgyne being. Stories of the original creation, which was actually of what we believe is an androgynous, androgyne being. So that specific scene, I think, was depicting that. So it just proves more towards the point of the original creation being not only an androgyne being, but also that the soul itself that is depicted in these pods is what the fact is. Thing that was brought to the attention as we were researching this film was that we have discussed the concept of avatars and how that relates to a world of a simulated situation. So the way that I believe this works is that our bodies are the avatars. Our physical bodies are the avatars in this world. So the Matrix movie, when Neo wakes up, I should say, let me clarify, before he wakes up, the world that he was living in was the simulation. That's the world we live in. It's Jehovah's simulation, his false magic kingdom. So in this dynamic, our souls are basically the video game players, and our bodies are the avatars, like a game character in a video game, that we control and that we move and interact with our world here. We were just watching a clip from Dune that was depicting this, and you know, it was showing how you know, the body is a made from clay and iron, which is going into the whole story of the devil making his creations from clay and iron. And so what is showing here is that the body is made up of electricity. And I'll throw this to you, Johnny, because you brought this up, that, you know, this is what the avatar, the character in the video game, is made up of, is made of plasma or blood. It is the computer that allows our souls to interact via I guess of an electrical neural means to interact in this world. Just like if you were to put yourself inside of a computer, you would need a character to move around inside of it, or you would need a very realistic, in this case, body to move inside a virtual world. And, you know, we have to understand that this is a very complex situation. It's not literally a 3D character. It's far more complex than that. You know, what do you have to say to that, Johnny? You know, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I mean, the blood is exactly what I guess you could say, the current that carries the electrochemical impulses that make us alive, right? And, you know, we are electrochemical beings, just like an avatar. And that's a great analogy element. Just like the avatar in, say, Grand Theft Auto 5 or World of Warcraft or Fallout 4, whatever have you. Those are Waldos, if you will, that are being controlled by you from elsewhere, just like we are being controlled from the Heil by the pneuma, or the souls, from the Matrix's imagining in these captive in these pods. And I finally understand, you know, the accusation, I guess you will, or the supposition that pundits like David Icke say, like, "Oh, we live in a hologram, we live in a virtual reality, and you don't get it." Well, now I do get it. You know, I do understand what he's talking about, that this reality is a simulation, a simulacra, it's a construct.
Yes.
I don't think, as crazy as many people that might be listening here think he is. I think he's kind of nuts myself, but David Icke isn't completely far off, at least in that concept, that notion that we are living in a false reality. Or at least, well, it's not false. It's real. It's just, it's constructed. It was manufactured.
Yeah, it's about as false as the sense of you looking at a 4K resolution version of you playing Call of Duty. It looks real, but it isn't. And it's real in the sense that it was created to be real, but it isn't. So, you know, it's the same concept, you know. Another thing to be noted about this is that, as Johnny said, it is a construct of a virtual holographic computer neural world, basically. And the way I believe that our souls are able to interact with this type of dynamic is where Neo is plugged into the back of his head into the Matrix, that is a very well-known plug that goes into the back of these people's heads that allow them to interact with the dream world. That, I believe, that particular part of the brain, I believe, is what is referred to in Matrix Wiki, which is where I found this, which is known to be what they quoted the subprocessor. So the subprocessor is that part of the brain that they're plugged into that allows them, as part of the mind, being part of the system that allows them to be engaged in the world through the soul. So that part of the brain is basically the subprocessor that generates the other half of what allows it to interface with the reality, which is why it has to be physically plugged into that part of the soul's brain, I guess.
Right.
You know.
Well, also, if you take a look at the human brain structure, that's over where the occipital lobe is, our dominant sense that we actually see in the back of our heads. That's where all the visual information that we consume is processed.
Well, that pretty much says it right there, I think, you know, that this what we're describing here is very much what the whole deal is. You know, another concept that was also brought to my attention is the thing of what they call you hear this a lot amongst New Age circles, but I'm going to clarify what I believe it really means. They call it the higher self. The higher self is your soul. Okay, so.
Oh, you mean the higher self?
Well, that is very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't think of it that way. The higher self. Okay. Wow. Well, I learn something new every day. It's very true, though, because that is what that, you know, again, they rephrase words to change the meaning so that people don't find the meaning. And so, you know, great point there. But it was noted that, you know, this whole higher self is the soul. And so you have two bodies basically going on here. You have the soul, that the real self of you, which we have noted to be inside the pods of the Matrix. That's where the soul is being used to generate the world that you are driving around the physical body. The second body is the physical body. It's the avatar body, the false body. And so you have this whole dynamic here of two bodies in two different places. The physical body, which is the character that you control in your soul, and then the soul body, which is up there, that is trapped in this pod system. So it brings a whole nother meaning to this whole thing that people talk about called twin flames and all that stuff. It makes me begin to wonder that that's what they're really discussing, because of this whole thing that we feel so real, that our real bodies are really what they are, and this is all there is. You know, this is a much more advanced system here that people are not aware of this dualistic situation here. Johnny, I want to go a little bit into how this relates, specifically the Gnostic story and the Gnostic information, that how it pertains to the Matrix. Because if you remember, there was a group of people, I think it was either a group or a ship, on the Nebuchadnezzar, and guess what they were called? They were called the Logos.
Yeah, that's right. They were called the Logos, which is Greek for the word. So these were people that were spreading the truth. They were giving out the word of truth to the denizens of what is known as Zion in the Matrix. movies. And what do you know about them, Element?
I'm sorry, I think I cut out there. Were you throwing it back to me there?
Yeah, about the logos,
Yes, the
people that were
logos.
actually going out and speaking the word of truth to the people of Zion to help wake them up, to give them the red pill, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what in Gnosticism there was the group called the Logos, and so this whole Matrix story, it is going into the Gnostic whole deal of it being emulated in a movie called The Matrix, and you have the Logos, which is a group of people in the Gnostic teachings. You have the concept of the world being a simulation, which the Mayans discussed as the world being a dream state, a world of illusion. Also, Mayat in Maya means to divide. So there is a division between two worlds. If people have ever seen the David Lynch series called Twin Peaks,
Mm-hmm.
Twin Peaks, well, the Twin Peaks are the two different worlds. And so Fire Walk with Me, and there's a specific quote of that. I think it was the TV show, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was the movie. He goes, "A magician longs." How did it go? A magician longs to see something, something. A magician longs to see that walks between two worlds. Fire Walk with Me. So what he's referring to between the two worlds would be the world of the Heil and the world of the illusion. And David Lynch was very aware of this.
Yeah,
And he
I'd
knew.
agree with that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was able to talk about hypostatic reality, which is what we do exist in right here and now. We are living in two different realities simultaneously. I am experiencing the corposa, or the constructed reality, whereas in the Heil, I am in a simulator that, a type of, I guess you could say, vessel or mechanism that is basically my Xbox controller for me. And you
That's a
have
good point.
one, and everybody watching this has one.
And the controller would be the subprocessor, which would be the mind, which is
Mm-hmm.
why they have to plug in, just like you have to either plug in your controller to your game. Now it's all wireless, but that signal there
Either
is,
way, it's your USB port. Sure.
yeah, exactly. It's your USB port, and you have to interact with it somehow. So that part of the mind is the controller. So that's a good point there. We have to understand that you have to don't you cannot think you have to think differently about this in order to understand about it. We use these analogies of it being a video game because it's a great example, because that's exactly the situation. The demiurge are the controllers of higher level people, like your politicians, your CEOs, and your celebrities. Also Legion. Legion and the Archons. Legion is basically the foot soldiers for the Archons. So I guess in a certain sense, the most important people would be controlled by the Archons. Otherwise, the smaller level people, like celebrities, unless they have some deep significance, would be controlled by legions, to do certain jobs that ultimately work as a hive system for the Archon. So it all goes up the hierarchy ladder. So we use these concepts to illustrate this in the discussions we have about how we call it a video game. The console is the system at which is generating the simulated world, and we're inside of it. That's funny too, why they call it an Xbox. It's just a fractal of the main system.
Oh, wow. I never even thought about that. I mean, here you have the box, the cube with the X. You know what I mean? And,
Yes,
and
exactly.
it's talking about the fractured state of how, many millions of them are populating the earth. That's really crazy. And, when we're talking about Legion, too, I guess you're making an allusion, or at least bringing it back to the movie The Matrix. Agent Smith. He's
Yes,
Legion.
exactly.
I mean, remember when Neo's fighting him, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of Agent Smiths fighting Neo.
Mm-hmm.
There you
Yeah.
go. That's a perfect illustration of the concept of Legion.
Absolutely. And another another aspect to this is that, you ever heard of that whole, I'm sure people who have heard of the whole thing where they call them, going back to David Icke, how he refers to these things is called shape-shifting reptilians.
Right.
Well, the whole deal with Agent Smith was that he was shape-shifting into different people because they were the gatekeepers, they were legions, and I guess they can shapeshift, but I don't think they're reptilians. I think that they're demonic legions. I think there's a
Right.
misnomer there. But they do shapeshift because they're the gatekeepers. They can change into different forms. We just have to, uh, explain that better than what has been noted with this whole reptilian thing. It's more legion. It's not reptilian stuff. I guess they can take form of whatever they want, but the whole point is that they are legion. They're there to be the gatekeepers from preventing people from escaping the simulation. Because what did the very thing that these things needed, the machines needed to live, which was energy, electricity. And so they have to harvest electricity to maintain their existence and also to fuel the AI of which they are with this system. Just like you need electricity to power your computer, they need electricity to power their computer.
Right,
That's
exactly.
why they need it.
Without the power, there is no generator. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It goes back as like a recycling or respawning chain where the power is uptaken by the generator. The generator, once again, conduits the power. It's I know it sounds like you're talking in circle. I'm talking in circles here, but that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, because it's a cycle.
Well, yeah.
Well, that leads us into the second point here, which is, um, you know, war and violence are nothing more than tools used to fuel the energy to power the console. Okay, so when I refer to the console, I'm referring to the AI that runs the simulation. Okay, so that is the thing that Neo was hooked into. So they need electricity to power the console. So they do this by inside the simulation, the dream world. They use war and violence. They have many purposes for this, but one of the main ones, I believe, is to power the console. So war and violence are a means of which to harvest energy. It creates an electrical charge that powers the system. Now, so going back to the red pill and the blue pill, and also on the subject of MGTOW, which is one of the main things that they abstain from, which is sexual engagement. And the reason for this is because sexual engagement and sexual activity is one of the biggest proponents is the biggest energy creator. So a whole society now is built on over sexualization because it's the biggest electrical current going through to the console. So they over sexualize the whole society to be able to create a higher to create enough energy to power it. And that's one of the biggest ones, that one and war. Because what are the two main things that go on here? Or the two main things that are always synonymous with each other?
Sex and death. Yeah, right.
Yeah, sex and violence, because it's
right.
the two main. It's the thing that creates the most amperage charge for the system. So
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
That is pretty crazy, and I understand exactly why so much value is put on both those concepts. I mean, entire industries, main industries, are fueled by sex or violence or violence.
Yeah, it's the biggest. It's the biggest thing that draws the most amperage, and that's what they push in all of society now. And that's the whole thing now that they're trying to push is sex and violence everywhere in the news, everything in the media, and our whole society now is based on sex and violence. And takes form of various different things like feminism and like the whole sexual assault thing. That you have to understand that the whole sexual assault story that's going on is an occultic story of power being flowing through to the console. Except they disguise it as being a story of actual sexual assault, but in reality, a sexual assault is like a charge assault. It is a power assault into the system. So you have to understand that these stories are coded in a way that the people who can see them you're looking at a completely different story. So the whole thing with sexual assault that came into the Harvey Weinstein deal and all that. He's a J. I'll just say that. You know, he's a big J.
Okay.
And so, you know, because he's that, you know, you have to understand that they understand about the Kabbalic stories and systems at which they operate under. So they're using physical, and they're at a high-level executive position too. So they're getting orders from the demiurge, basically, to tell them we need more power, and your specific node in the simulation needs to start drawing more current.
I never even thought about that. You know, I mean, that's exactly what is happening. My question is, why is it happening? You know, why is it happening right now?
Well, an interesting thing that I believe is because of AI. They need more energy to push more codes through, I think, into well, they're trying to recharge. You know, they need to charge something, just like you need to charge a flashlight to emanate light.
Mm-hmm.
Occultically, you need to charge a system to be able to have it ready to go. So possibly regarding the whole thing with AI is they're trying to charge up enough energy to create something to possibly create the you know, another world, a simulation within inside of a simulation, and they're starting to draw charge and amperage from it so that they can basically get the charge that they need to you know, push the new system, you know, possibly.
Right, I agree. I mean, our reality isn't a perpetual motion machine. You know, there has to be a power supply, and that power supply is not getting its juice for free. You see, and in order to, you know, increase it, to kick it up a notch, whatever have you, there has to be, you know, a great upheaval, a great surge in that power generation.
Exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly the deal. Again, in the Matrix, we see the architect. The architect is Jehovah. He creates a simulation. He's actually referred to as having gray hair and a gray beard because that's what Jehovah is, characteristics of that are emulated or depicted in the movie being. And so, you know, that is why they put that there. It's all done for a very specific reason, to tell the story of the whole situation that we are existing in. You know, and the whole thing with charges and electricity, the whole thing is, you mentioned, it's in a constant state of entropy and chaos, because chaos and entropy create charge in electricity the best possible way. So you look at the infinity sign, that also translates into life and death. It's the cycle of life and it's the cycle of death. At the beginning, there's a halfway point in the middle, and there's a halfway point in the end. There's a halfway point of growing up and a halfway point of dying. So the first half of your life, you're growing up. The last half of your life, you're dying. So it's a charge it's a positive, and then it's a negative. The positive is you growing or evolving or charging. The negative side is you discharging the negative. So a positive and a negative. So a positive creates the charge, the negative discharges the charge. So that represents the two crossings of the side of the body, of the brain. And I don't mean to get too technical here, but it's that entropy. It's that beginning and end. It's the charge building and the charge ending. And it's just a currency. It's the infinity.
Yeah, like we're talking about the dynamic between sex and violence earlier. You know, it's the same concept that's going on in terms of that type of law of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And we're ruled by it, and I feel that, you know, I mean, my understanding is that the Heil is ruled very much in the same way, as above, so below.
I would agree. And sex is the act of creation, and violence is the act of destruction, the positive charge and the negative charge. So the whole world's based on charge, which is what's used to power the console that is used to generate the simulation. So that's why this place, and I'm going to make this very clear to anybody listening, because it's very important for you to understand this. This place will always be chaos. This whole love and light and everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya ain't going to be happening. Sorry. It's not, because they need a charge. there's going to be there's good things that happen, but don't expect anytime soon to everybody be dropping their guns and stuff and not going to war. That is just how this place works, because it requires the energy to fund the system. And so this is why you must not get caught up in the news, because news and all these other various concepts are used. News stands for north, south, east, and west. That's the cube, which is the console. So from north, south, east, and west, the console is being charged by news. So news is the charge of the cube, and then that's why they put negative news to charge the north, south, east, and west sides of the cube or the console.
It's funny. I mean, Element, you're completely right. You're not going to have a winning side. There will not be any day where it's like, hurrah, the Republicans have won, or hurrah, the Democrats have won. There's always going to be conflict. We can't help it. And it's not something that is so base and physical, like, oh, well, that's human nature, just deal with it. Or we're always fighting over money. Money is a MacGuffin. Money is just a scorecard.
It's a currency.
It's a current. Well, yeah, literally, but the real currency is in the blood.
Yes, and that's why in the movie Dune, if you've ever seen the movie Dune with David Lynch's directed Dune, spice is blood, and that's the thing that they needed to power the machine, which is the currency. So blood is currency, blood money. So, that's why in politics you have a red and a blue. The red is the positive, the blue is the negative. So a charge from people getting amped up from voting for one side. That's why every political campaign is so blown up and just completely, insane. There's rioting going on. There's people losing their minds, because they have to draw charge to create the system, the new system that they created, which would be the elected official. That's the new system. So they have to be able to, charge the system in order to make that happen. So that's what's representative red and blue. It's a charge system.
Well, just like in our veins, in our arteries, in the arteries, you have the oxygenated red blood, and in the veins, you have the deoxygenated blue blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
You made a direct analogy to it, right? Or a direct comparison right there.
Yeah, and you breathe in air. I
never even thought about that before.
Yeah, plants do it. We do it. When you breathe in air, it's converted into red blood cells. When you breathe out air, it exhales. So it's a state of charging. You're building a charge by inhaling. You're expelling the charge by exhaling. So the whole world is based on currency and electricity, because it's what funds the system. And also, when you look at, here's another thing, Johnny, you might not know, but I think you might. When you look at roads are nothing more than electrical currents, like a bus line in your motherboard. And charges are being charged on the highway when cars drive. Cars are the charges manifested in vehicles that charge the lines at which people ingress, charge, or exgress, decharge. So the whole system is based on this. And then you have central nodes, which are the cities that charges are built in, which people work and generate a lot more charges to build a system of what they call a city. And so, I can go on and on and on with this. And it could also be equated that the highways are America's arteries, carrying its blood currency through the system to create it. So it's all charge.
Yeah, no, I do see that. I do see that comparison. I understand that analogy, and it works on a macro and a micro level just like that. It's like we were talking about a couple episodes ago, how we are creating copies of the copy that we are. You know what I mean? It just continues on and on.
Yeah, I'm really glad, this is off topic, but I'm glad that we finally came to a solid realization, I guess you could say, of how the system works, because now we really have our foot in the door, so to speak. Now we can, because it's like, A lot of the research, when you go into this kind of research, it takes a lot of hours. I mean, guys, you know, behind the scenes, I'm doing this stuff, and Johnny behind the scenes is researching a lot. It takes hours and hours and hours and years to finally come to a conclusion of how you understand it. But once you get that final bit of the piece, I guess you could say, you're able to now see and operate from that main point and see how the whole thing ties in. And once you see that, that is the whole purpose of why we like to do this channel, because it allows you to live a much, you're not getting caught up in the whole, you know, nonsense of the world that sucks your energy from you. You know, the whole thing of a book I was reading was talking about how, yeah, it was talking about Matrix warriors, and how Matrix warriors do not, they store their charge. They do not get caught up in over exaggerated, what is the word for it? Over exaggerated emotions that things like the news try to charge the console with, of negativity. And so you must maintain a center balance. There's a thing in a ritual called the middle pillar ritual, which I don't know too much about it, but I know that it has to do with currency, and it has to do with the balancing. So, you know, that is what the whole deal is balancing and storing that energy, not getting caught up in all the drama and the mundane garbage of this world. Johnny, was there anything you'd like to mention on that before I move forward?
Well, actually, no. I mean, I think that it is great, though, that I, at least personally, have been able to find that kind of visual touchstone by which I can have these concepts gel. Like I said, I've heard them all before. I understood them, but by actually visually gelling them in my head and being able to envision them, okay, it's so much easier for me now to understand Gnostic concepts, and being able to understand, you know, metaphor and allegory, something that, you know, is you're introduced to in high school, right? But at the same time, it's just like, okay, well, you know it, but do you get it? And I think for me that is kind of revelatory.
Well, I'm glad that, you know, and it makes researching the information much easier, because
Sure.
you can now relate it back to this whole story, you know, and you can understand the concepts. I want to touch on one final thing before we move forward. We guys, we might run a little bit over today, because I really want to get this concept out there, because once the show, and Johnny, by the way, and also to the people listening, I'm going to put together an edit of different pictures. And so instead of just having us, you see our profiles, I'm actually going to make like a PowerPoint type of deal that shows different pictures of where we're talking about this, so that you guys can kind of get a visual idea. Like Johnny was saying, he's very visual. I think that this would also benefit to people watching. So I'll be doing that over the weekend, and we'll be having a more complete visual system here that you're able to follow along with us.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that it's you know, helps reference citations and the source of our information. Some of our information doesn't really have a source. It's just our supposition of information that we had compiled together, and you know, we're trying to help draw conclusions. It's not to say that this is written in stone, that it's law. I'm not an adherent of any kind of dogma, and this is certainly not dogmatic, but what we're talking about here tonight, especially with films like The Matrix and Dune, are being able to show how the directors and writers and the creators of these films understand visually the structure of our commingling realities of the corpuscle and the hyal.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, let's move on then. And I want to talk about the final section today, which would be something that we've discussed before, and it is the new age of AI and its relation to this Matrix story, which is why I want to devote the last bit of this time to this section, because it really is the final conclusion, I think, to something that I believe has happened before in history. We look at different civilizations, like one of them I think was Atlantis. They had a lot of technology that was very high in technology. They had a lot of same kind of stuff and concepts that we have now. And see, they don't tell you this because they don't want you to know. But there's a constant theme that is run throughout civilization of high technology being built up to a certain point and then it all being destroyed. I believe that technology is AI. I believe that technology is the destructor, which is, I believe, AI. When we look at our society now, everything that we own it has some form of what they call like Bluetooth or wireless Wi-Fi. Basically, it goes into something and then it receives it. So everything is connected in with everything, which is a hive system. AI operates on a hive system. Okay, so everything that we have here is going back and emulating to building up of this AI that we now are seeing manifested in the news. AI is going to be used as the main control system, and I think also a possible main destructor. Because once you build it up to a certain point and it controls everything, just like the movie Terminator, you know, what did they call that movie Terminator? They called it Judgment Day. So Judgment Day was the day of destruction. And guess what the whole theme of that movie was? It was an AI that took over everything. So AI is definitely going to be, as we move towards the next few years, we see this a lot now with news of advances in AI by leaps and bounds of robots. And also Johnny and I were looking at a video of a robot from Boston Dynamics, which looked like a dog. And this thing was just like pretty advanced, I tell you what. And so, you know, what do you think, you know, about that, Johnny?
Well, of course they're ramping up the artificial intelligence because that lies within the realm of the unliving, at least for now. I mean, you could fuse AI with the living and make it this cybernetic chimera of the living and the non-living. And I think that that's exactly what the next stage is gearing up for. And we're alive here. You and I and everybody watching this right now, we're alive now to see this unfold, to see this transpire. It just it is what it is. There really isn't any kind of way to fight it. And like we were saying earlier on in the show, there's no way to win. You know, it's not going to happen. This conflict is going to continue on and on and on. We're not going to win. The AI might not win. Okay, it's not supposed to. That's not what it's about. It's
to destroy.
It's about destruction. Yeah, we have to have that release of energy, that entropic release of chaos. Yes. And then that'll eventually get harnessed again in an age after that. You know?
Yeah, they need a big explosion to create the new age. They need enough energy to create the new age, the new simulation to begin again. So it controls up to a point and then it destroys itself. It's like a self-destruct mechanism. So it will be built up to.
And then once and throughout that, after that destruction, there's a period of rebuilding. And we're not talking about destruction in terms of like, you know, the big collapse where everybody's dressed up like Mad Max and they have flamethrowers on the top of their Chevys. We're talking about just a reboot of the entire system. So, you know, we might be, I don't know, WASP people or something next time around. I don't know.
I think more probably transhumanistic people that are plugged into it, possibly. I think that's what's coming, you know, before the whole thing blows up. I think that's because, you know, Johnny and I we were discussing this very same thing, which is that this whole Mark of the Beast dealio, which is the direct connection of harvesting energy to harvest it and assimilate it permanently into the system so that it can basically, when it starts up again, it can, you know, have enough souls, so to speak, who are completely there permanently. Because I think the new age of Aquarius will be an age completely dominated by AI from the get-go. I don't think it will be this building up like it was here. I think it's going to start right from the start. Because the age of Aquarius is synonymous with high technology. So I think right from the start, we're going to have AI on that level. run the show, and that's why they need people to be tied into it so that they can start it and have that energy.
Isn't that kind of ironic though? Like back in the '60s when the hippies were like, heralding and celebrating the upcoming age of Aquarius, they thought it was like all natural granola bars and hairy armpits and stuff. But little do they know, it's just like a world of the unliving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what we see now. You
can sell anybody anything, there's a sucker born every frickin' minute.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And now what we see with AI right now is building itself up for complete control. I think at this point, we see this a lot on YouTube, because YouTube is a main platform for which people spread information, and information is a very important aspect to making decisions. And so I think because people started asking too many questions, they began to start to cut off that source, because it's a negative discharge. It's not creating any positive on their level. To us, it's positive because we're getting information, which allows us to build up our own energy to fight it. But see, they can't have that. So knowledge is a form of positive energy charged with for us. For them, it's a negative energy because it's an inversion of the system, you see. So they have to cut off that to prevent that from getting any further out of control. So now AI will be the main proponent to maintain the positive charge.
No, I see what you're saying right there. It makes a whole bunch of sense, because what YouTube was doing was causing it was laying out a platform of mimetic warfare against the Archons. And we were gaining headway, we're gaining ground, but what's the best way to conquer an army? Well, you take away its weapons, you disarm it. And by taking away YouTube, and by taking away a platform like YouTube, you're taking away that vessel, that bus of armament for a mimetic warfare. Simple.
Or in this case, going back to the energy, it's a energetic warfare of the avatars. It's like when you play a video game and the boss, like there's some even video games that show this, where like they run off energy and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, that's the same concept of us, of our bodies here, our avatars here, gaining like points up in the game. So that would be getting information, which creates a charge in a metaphysical way.
I can see that.
And the deal is that, we have at this point, I'd say we still have free will to make our own decisions inside the game, just like an AI and like Grand Theft Auto has the ability to get inside of a car and drive to a specific destination and then get out to maintain that type of, environment or illusion to the game. But I think that what's going to happen now with AI is that they're going to make sure that they get us all the energy that they can, and you won't have the ability to make your own decisions and go where you want. It's like, the best analogy to this would be like a free roam game where you can go anywhere in the game and do what you want. This is going to be more like a Call of Duty game where it's like, okay, you go from point A to point B to point C to point D.
Ride the rails, right? Yeah. It's funneled, it's tunneled, and that's something that is very interesting, because I had come from this as looking at the currency was free will. The main goal of the Archons was to win over our free will and take it away from us. But now I'm thinking more about it, and it just turns out to be the old-fashioned war over resources, and those resources are our energy. Something I really got to think about later on.
Yeah, and it's deep stuff. And guys, if you're listening, you might have to listen to this podcast many times before you understand what we're discussing. And, I suggest you should, because I want everybody to understand this. And that goes into what you just said, Johnny. In the Animatrix, it showed that the AI was warring against humans to rebel and start the system all over again. It needed that charge. It needed the, like when you're creating a transformer, you need a certain amount of energy going into it all at the same time, or else it becomes unbalanced.
Okay.
you know, if the humans are not putting out enough energy all equally, henceforth, that's why society is now, and all the technology is now moving in a hive system, so that it puts out all the right amount of energy in the right transformer to the console.
Mhm.
It's like if you plug in your console to a high wattage out plug, it's going to blow up the console. So they have to be able to have the right amount of energy. And that, the way I guess you would do that is you would get society formed into a hive system that a right amount of energy is being outputted.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I see what you mean. That there is a goal for that, and certain amount has to be attained.
Exactly.
The question
Yeah,
is,
there has to be.
we humans don't exactly know what that is.
No.
We don't know
Yeah,
what that
I'm pretty
figure
sure
is.
it might be what the Animatrix was referring to. Why they need all those charges is because at the end of the Animatrix, the nuclear bomb goes off. Maybe that's what the charge is for.
Sure, I mean we've had nuclear bombs go off plenty of times.
Yeah.
Throughout. Not just Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but I mean all over the world. We've been doing tests. In the Sahara and the South Pacific, right here in the American deserts. That kind of energy has been exploded, has been released. That amount of chaos has been going on. Siberia, they've been doing it there.
Oh, really? Siberia.
Oh yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
apparently there's entire towns that are missing during the Soviet era. They were just kind of like not very. I guess the Soviets, when they were testing their missiles, weren't exactly all that considerate of where
Yeah.
where they were falling and detonating them. But I don't know. I mean that's a conspiracy theory right there, though.
Well, this also goes into the whole big thing that everybody likes to talk about, which is the mark of the beast and microchips. Really, what this, I believe, just comes down to is that basically it will allow any person who is inside the system to be under the complete control of the AI, because those microchips will be linked into AI. I guarantee you. It'll be linked into a central point in which whatever that AI is, it's sending out signals that control whoever has those chips. So you literally are driving around a person, and the AI would be the controller. Think of it like if there's a movie called THX 1138 and everybody has like a little chip inside of them, or they're marked or tagged with something,
Right.
so that they can create energy, they can create that charge, that all work as a hive worker bees to create an ultimate agenda or goal towards a situation. And so I believe what is going to face us, and this is something that's very important, is that we must understand that our world is basically turning into a 1984 Brave New World. But I think what it will more than likely turn out to is a THX 1138 system run by AI. And right before, and it will run that way for, I think, a period of time, I believe, and then it will destroy once it's reached its current charge.
Right.
Humanity, and then start what it wanted. So it's like when you play a game and you build up something, or I should say when you're going to destroy a huge building, you put charges in there and then blow the whole system out so that you can build something new there again. And so they're doing that. They're getting the people working to build the charge to destroy the old building so they can build a new one, basically.
Yeah, right. You have to level the playing field, make it tabula rasa, a clean slate before you can rebuild. Rather than take what's existing and retrofitting it into something new.
Yeah, that's how I view it, at least.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can see that coming. I mean, I don't know exactly when, how long from now, what year that would happen, but sure. Do you think?
Yeah.
When we're just one last point before we wrap things up. Do you think that we will live to see? You know how we live in the AD calendar, Anno Domini, or Domini? Yeah, there we go. Do you believe that do you suspect that we might live to see that reset to year one of whatever it's going to be called?
It's hard to say. It's possible. Anything is possible.
I mean, I think
at the
that
rate
would
we're
be
moving
soon. Yeah.
moving with all this advancement in AI and how, I mean, AI has been implemented in everything. It's just, I mean, it's been running since the 70s, really. They've done AI since the 60s even. So
Yeah.
this system has been in place for a long time. It's just now that they've decided to make it public about how advanced it really is. So this system has been building itself out of the public's eye for a long time. I think now it's just that they're now just starting to roll it out into the public to get that final bit of energy in which people take that mark, to get that final bit of energy, which everybody then assimilates and works all together for this AI to build its final block, and then it goes out. So, you know, I think it's a possibility that, you know, I say prepare.
Yeah,
And this leads me to my
right.
final, this leads me into my final discussion, which is how do you survive something like this? The only thing that I term of surviving is you need to be aware of this. Like Bitcoin right now is a big thing. Don't put all your money into it. I can guarantee you that, because it doesn't, you know, they're going to eventually try to link that stuff into biometrics, which is like chipping. Okay. And that would be like their form of currency, a digital currency, again, an AI connection. So be aware of smart technology, smartphones, smart TVs, smart cars, anything with the word smart in it is a big red flag that ultimately you should associate that word with AI, because it is controlled by AI.
Yeah, that is true. Sooner or later, though, there won't be, you know, any products out there as an alternative to it, unless, you know, there are people who will have the facility and the wherewithal to create, say, you know, non-smartphones or non-smart televisions or whatever have you. Generation from now, people won't know anything but. You know, they just aren't going to be able to understand that. And, you know, not to be a total Luddite, I love technology, don't get me wrong, but I'm just very wary about where it's going. And because I do feel that there is a holistic, or dare I say demonic agenda. And the AI is going to be, you know, the tool for to win that war. So,
Yeah. Well, that pretty much wraps up today. Johnny, is there anything else you want to mention?
nope. I just want to let you everybody know, like every episode we talk about what we learned, and today I learned that, or maybe came to an understanding that it's not just a war of free will. It's this is a war for energy. Just like any other mundane war is, you know, it's resources, right? And that to me is, you know, something that I am kind of understanding, and it's very much in tandem with the movie The Matrix. Those that they weren't just fighting for free will, but they were also fighting for the energy that they were. You know, these people were batteries, and we're batteries. Our souls are batteries.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I learned that I have a better understanding of the situation that faces us, and it now gives me a better point to move from in my research further into understanding and getting a better understanding of anything that is to come now. Anything further to come down the pipeline, I now can use this as a huge reference point and be able to now have even more clarity than I did before about information. And that will be able to not only allow me to discover new things, but also to create better podcasts that we do here to spread more information. And when Johnny and I discuss these things, be able for us to better, you know, get information and knowledge on our situation facing us. And so that's a good positive to that.
Yeah, I mean, the more we learn and the more that we research and the more that we process, the more the better the show will get. Our goal isn't to make a good show. You know, we're not here to entertain you or anything. We're
Right.
basically here for, you know, two men who are of, you know, studying Gnosticism in one way, shape, or another, try to improve ourselves in terms of gnosis, in terms of knowledge, as best as we can, and we're just sharing it with you guys, whoever is there to listen.
That's the idea. Thank you for joining us, and we'll get back with you guys next week with some more information. And with that being said, thank you for tuning in, and have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.